I'm stoked to have you on. Our mutual friend Spencer Newharth put me in touch with you after I had read one of your articles on MeatEater where I write as well, and then I went back and read some of your turkey stuff and thought, man, this guy seems like he knows what he's doing, especially on public land. And then Spencer said, you are a stone cold killer out there. And so I thought, well, we better get this recorded. And just randomly, your name has popped up in my world about 4 times recently. So it feels like it's serendipitous that we're doing this. So I really appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah, coming from Tony Peterson, that means a lot to me. No expert, but I just like to go get them.
Yeah, buddy. You are out in Rapid City, South Dakota, right?
Yeah, correct. Been out here for, 3 or 4 years, and came from East River, South Dakota, where it's a little more typical whitetail country. Moved west to antelope mule deer country and enjoying it out here.
Yeah, you have moved, where you grew up in South, it would be basically kind of southeastern South Dakota, right?
Correct, yep.
You come from big whitetails, pheasant country, and, not a lot of options, but some good hunting for that stuff, and turkeys, I'm sure, in the river bottoms, things like that. And then moved to like what I would consider the gateway to the West, like where you live now. You're probably awful close to being able to go see some elk, some mule deer, a lot of mule deer, probably whitetails. You're probably not very far away from antelope, and you just like what kicks off like that Western feel and the Western critters.
Yeah, it's pretty much a melting pot. It's really a good place to be. Drive a few hours to Wyoming, Montana. You can get into the elk, get an out-of-state license, and then 4 or 5 hours, you're back in the whitetails East River, and you kind of have the best of both worlds if you're willing to drive just a little bit.
Coming from, where you come from, it's whitetails. I mean, you're probably a couple hours from where you could start transitioning into mule deer, get across the river on the west side. But now you're in the heart of having both options. And, I think people, when they think of the Black Hills, they go, yeah, I go there for turkeys or I go there for mule deer. But you got a fair amount of whitetails mixed in there now, too. Do you find yourself going, I've had enough whitetails, I want to hunt mule deer? Or do you find yourself seeing those mule deer out in the hills and going, I want a little bit of that? Or how's that go for you?
Yeah, it's a good proposition to be in. When I first moved out here, the mule deer, since I lived in whitetail country, naturally gravitated towards those, and they just fascinated me. And I loved being in the wide open and being able to glass and just constantly seeing deer, and went that route for a few years. But the more turkey hunting I've done in the hills, you just start noticing, you pick up some decent sheds, you start seeing some nice whitetails, and you realize I should probably explore this avenue. There's some good whitetail bucks to be had in the hills.
Yeah, they're mixed together pretty well there. What do you find them on? What are they doing out there?
The whitetails, I'm just cutting my teeth on them. I'm more used to the East River typical whitetail habitat, but from what I'm seeing and scouting and just checking out, they seem to be one of two places. They're maybe hitting a burn and eating that lush vegetation, but because they're looking for the best food source, most of the times it's those HOAs and those housing developments with the lush green yards that get watered twice a day, and it's just the best food source available. So it seems like they're making like the turkeys do out here and feeding in the yards at night and heading up to the Forest Service and bedding in some thick untimbered forest, which is where we can capitalize.
Yeah, people think about, they're going to hear that and think that doesn't sound like that. It sounds like cheating almost to be like, oh, these deer are going down, they're feeding on people's shrubs and they're coming back up. But you have to hunt them where they are. And, it's the Black Hills, they kind of set up like big woods stuff. If you're in northern Michigan or northern Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, wherever, where if there is some kind of food source like that, you're going to find a big concentration of animals. And especially when you're talking whitetails. And, it's like you mentioned the turkeys. There's so many times where you'll hunt early season turkeys in South Dakota or Nebraska or a couple of these states where the public land is where they sleep and somewhere else is where they eat, and you probably can't hunt there. So you got to play that game of them coming and going. And, we accept it. If there was just a big pivot alfalfa field there and you're like, yeah, the deer come and go from that, nobody would bat an eye. But if you're like, yeah, they're going and, eating somebody's flower bed or their vegetable garden, it kind of sounds weird, but it's just where they're going to eat and how you have to play that as a public land hunter on the cover that they're coming back to.
Yeah, they're definitely creature of habit. They got to follow their gut, and wherever the best food source is, that's probably where you're going to find them. I mean, they're dispersed throughout. You'll find them various food sources, but it's just consistent pattern. There's green yards everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So,
What's a good one out there for a whitetail?
I've seen some that push 150. I've seen a couple though, probably past 150. But public land, I'd be happy with, anything 2.5, 3 years old that's 120 and over. That's pretty good whitetail around here, it seems like.
Yeah, and I obviously don't have as much experience there as you do, but the sheds I've found and the deer I've seen there, they kind of look and they seem like mountain bucks, kind of, where or more western that you'd think about, like where they're kind of a nice 8-pointer, but he's going to be 122 inches. You're not going to see these just massive farmland kind of looking bucks. They have a different look to them. Like you used to watch those videos in the Milk River in Montana, or you see somebody whitetail hunting in Wyoming somewhere. Like you can look at those bucks, kind of like you could a Texas buck, and just see that they come from a different place and they have that kind of lithe, kind of skinnier look to them, and the different kind of antlers.
Yeah. Funny you say that, because every time I head back east, now that I'm acquainted to these smaller bodied hills deer a little bit, the whitetail does back east just look gigantic, like a cow elk to me.
Yeah. It's a different thing. And I mean, it's just there. What's cool about that is just, maybe the difference of 6-7 hours in one state, and you can see what almost like, to the trained eye, almost looks like a different subspecies of deer, but it's just where they're from, man.
Yeah. All kinds of opportunity around here. Mountain whitetails.
Yeah, for sure. Do you see any elk out there?
Yeah. In the hills. I'm sure, non-residents, they can't draw a tag here, but we've got a decent elk population. Got to play the preference point game for a while, and you can draw a cow tag every few years on second choice, and done that once, and you'll run into some good whitetails where you see the elk, but the numbers just aren't the same as the suburban deer.
Have you spent any time in the Black Hills in Wyoming?
No, have not yet. Nope.
Yeah, I can't remember what units they are, but I look at them a lot when I'm thinking about where I'm going to cash in my points in Wyoming. And I just, because I have a lot of deer points too. And I've never, I've spent time in the Black Hills of South Dakota, never skipped across, never had a reason to spend any time in the Black Hills of Wyoming, but it's the same stuff. And it looks like you could have an awesome hunt there, but you don't hear much about people drawing those units and going devoting their time. They're usually heading farther west. Yeah,
you might be onto something, because I bet you wouldn't run into a lot of hunters if they've got a Wyoming general deer tag. They're probably playing with the rest of the state.
Well, that was kind of my thought. And I can't remember. It's been a little while since I've researched that, because I kind of moved on to other units. But I think the access to public was one of the things that kind of turned me off a little bit. And I might be misremembering that, so I don't want anybody to take that at face value. But there was something to that where I just didn't like how you had to get into some of those areas, or you couldn't get into some of them. Or I felt like it was a different access issue than you'd run in South Dakota when you're hunting there. It's pretty easy to figure out where the public is and how to get there.
Yeah, I've just looked at the public land in Wyoming just with no intentions. But if I remember right, the Black Hills of Wyoming, there's Forest Service, but it's just more or less big blocks and not as much. So there's probably congregated access points.
Yeah.
But it's been a while since I've looked.
Yeah, but the thing that I thought about with that too, and if that's true, it might be a situation where you could actually do a really cool bivvy hunt in there and go in. If it was legal and you could do it, it might be the kind of place, if somebody goes to Western Wyoming, they're thinking that kind of hunt, right? If you're a do-it-yourselfer on public land, you're carrying your camp and you're doing that, whether you're in grizzly territory or not. It might be in the Black Hills, people might not be thinking the same kind of thing, because it's not the true mountain hunt. And so it makes me wonder if a guy couldn't, even if you had to use the same access as everybody else, if you couldn't out hike them and get into a place where you could have a pretty cool hunt.
Yeah, that would be a cool hunt. It's the predictable access points kind of play in your favor too, because you know where the hunting pressure is going to come from. You can predict where it's not going to be just the same.
Yeah. I mean, that issue. Have you ever hunted Colorado, like a over-the-counter unit in Colorado?
Nope, not yet.
I mean, it's like, that's the complaint, right? Is, there's only so many trailheads. I mean, that's one of the complaints, I should say. But it's just kind of like, I feel differently about it because, I hunt whitetails a lot on public land, and a lot of times you have one access or maybe two access points and everybody uses them. So you're always thinking, okay, everybody's starting at the same spot. How do I out hunt or out hike or outwork the competition? The same rules apply out west in a lot of places. It's just a psychological thing you got to get over when you get to the trailhead, and there's, the outfitters have 10 horse trailers parked there, and there's 27 trucks from different states and Texas and Arkansas and Michigan and Wisconsin. And you're starting where a whole bunch of hunters started. So what do you do then? And it's just, I think there's a legitimate gripe there, but I think part of it is just a psychological thing.
Yeah, I can imagine. I've heard it's a pretty wild ride pulling up to the trailhead and seeing that much competition, but you can use it to your favor.
You can. And when you think about that, it's all hunting pressure, right? But you use the word competition. How much of those people are actually in competition with you? And that's what I always think about with the whitetails. There's like a disservice we do as like outdoor communicators, where like we don't really talk about skill level very much. And like, I know maybe this will make me sound like a dick, but it kind of feels like everybody thinks that they come into this with the same skills. And, like, well, if this guy can do it, I can do it. If Zach Fehrenbaugh from the hunting public can go out there and kill one on the ground, why can't I? And it's like, man, there's no challenging thing out there where we all come in with the exact same skill set. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah. That is an odd concept. And then too, just thinking about that, you pull up on the trailhead and see a ton of people. Half of them might be chasing elk. Half of them might be day hiking, backpacking. If you're hunting whitetails or something, you might be the only guy out there doing it.